Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Talk Sports. Wow. So weekend program. You see, I just time just creep up on me like that. Yeah, weekend program where we speak with the movers and shakers of sports, the sportsmen, sportswomen, sports administrators, coaches, just about everyone who is involved in sports. Well, on today's program, this weekend's program to be exact, as indicated, we'll be discussing the national policy on sports and physical activity. You have been hearing a lot about what we commonly call the national sports policy. And we have two of the people who have been driving the whole initiative in Grenada over the past few months with all the reconsultations, etc., who will be discussing that with us. And we should have them up momentarily. We're speaking of former Sports Minister Patrick Simmons, who's an advisor to the current Minister of Sports. And we also have Mr. Alvin Clouden of the National Sports Council Secretariat. Yeah, I hope I got it right. Well, he'll give us all the details and when we start. But before we actually start that, there are a couple of things I wanted to mention regarding the what should I say? There's an athletes commission, right? And there's one of those things that I know there is the plans, as they said, to have a session for the athletes. Let me, Hazel has been speaking about that. That's the Grenada Athletes Commission. There's a forum coming up next weekend from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. The rights and responsibility of athletes, the athletes' mental well-being, and the adoption of the athletes' declaration. And the guest speaker is Anika Hopkin, on a sports psychologist in training. So that's one of those things that you can look forward to coming up next weekend. That's for all the athletes. Yeah. And when they say athletes, I think in the broadest, well, I am hoping is in the broader perspective, even though he himself is a former track and field athlete. I'm just hoping that. Okay. And then there's also for you the England Tour of the Caribbean 2 T20 International scheduled for Grenada in December. Come the second T20 International on the 14th of December. That's a Thursday. And then the Saturday is the third T20 International. Both be played at the Grenada National Cricket Stadium. So that's West Indies versus England, T20 International. 5 T20 Internationals, 2 for Grenada. The first one will be in Barbados, the next 2 in Grenada, and the following 2 will be in Trinidad. Brian Lara Cricket Stadium, Kensington Oval. And the 3 one-day internationals, the first 2 will be in Antigua, and the third one will be in Barbados. So Grenada has 2 T20 matches in December, West Indies versus England. You can look forward to that. So as indicated, we'll be talking about the national policy on sports and physical activity. As soon as we can see Mr. Simmons, we'll bring him up. But we do have Mr. Clouden, that's Alvin Clouden, who is with us. And then we also have Rudy and Sylvan over in Toronto. He will also join us. But let me say good afternoon to you, Mr. Clouden.
Good afternoon, Michael, and to your viewers and listeners wherever they may be.
Right. And glad to have you. And I'm hoping that within the next hour or so, we'll be able to discuss about the sports policy, as we will say for short, in the national sports policy. We know the correct
Correct.
name
Yeah.
is the national policy on sports and physical activity. And we'll say why it is physical activity as well, okay? Because it's important that people get the whole concept of the importance of it. But we're hoping that we can have Mr. Simmons join us on video in a short while. But as an opener, Mr. Clouden, tell us, because there have been over the past few months a series of reconsultations with the national sports policy. What is the status with all these reconsultations, I should say, on the sports policy?
Well, thank you, Michael, for having us on your program. We were on your program sometime late last year together with persons of the diaspora, where one of the consultations were held. But first, let me begin at the beginning. And I want to say first, why is sports and physical activity policy? A sports and physical activity policy articulates the government's vision, strategy, and high level plans regarding sport and physical activity in the country. Without a policy, the government is unable to effectively leverage the power of sports and physical activity. Going forward, and reference to sports policy includes quality physical activity. This is one of the change made to the initial policy document. It is no longer just physical activity, but we must include quality physical education. I'm certain when your co-host join us, he will understand the difference. And let me just add a little bit on quality physical education. Quality physical education, which is what it will be spearheaded by the ministry through a curriculum focus shift, and it deals with the frequency, variety, inclusiveness, and value content. The UNESCO policy says quality physical education emphasizes peer led learning and rounded skill development, which enhances education and employability outcomes. It is also about the whole body health, which includes physical and psychological well being. So I just wanted to lay that as to why we are doing all of this work and why our policy. Um, the status right now is that we are preparing to do what will be called a cabinet submission to send to cabinet of ministers so that they can review. But before we do that, we will want to have a consultation with the stakeholders who initially participated in the policy. We'll do an internal review, and once we are satisfied, but we have some tight timelines to deal with all of this because we will want to have this policy implemented before the end of the year. So that is where we currently are.
Uh, uh, right, because it's important for us to even have, because we have been hearing so much about the sports policy that it's now, I assume, timelines and all these things are things that are in consideration. You may have timelines, but just that we don't know what are the timelines you're looking at for the implementation, whether it's phase or full implementation of the policy.
Correct. But again, let me just um, go to this thing. What is the sports policy? The National Policy on Sports and Physical Activity was approved in 2010 after a series of consultations with federations and selected groups, which began in 2008. So you hear people talk about, wow, this is been going on for a very long time. So the process, yes, did start in 2008, approved in 2010, and an act was passed in 2012. So the act established the National Sports Council on the 7th of January 2012 and gazetted on the 13th of January 2012 as an Act 2012 entitled the National Sports Council Act. So the policy has evolved into an act, right? So it gives it legislative teeth and guidelines. The policy then defines the vision, objectives, necessary legislation, and strategic directions, roles and responsibilities, and an action plans, the activities that will drive this policy for the development of sports, quality physical education, and physical activity. The policy therefore requires a number of things: government leadership and organization 2, insights and impact measurements. Partnership, funding requirements. How will we fund this policy? 5, coaching, talent identification. 6, legislation. And as we said, have now revised the policy. It's going to go to cabinet. It's going to go as an act, and therefore legislation. Then we have communication and campaigns. As part of your program and other areas that you have been assisted in, is to enable persons to know what is in this policy so that we can communicate and talk about the campaigns. Then we have to deal with the programs and events to achieve the policy. And last, facilities and infrastructure. Several times policies fail because we don't have an action plan and we don't have the budget to fund it. And one of the things we have been very careful with is to ensure that we have a budget to fund whatever we say in this policy. So, what will the National Council do as an authority coming out of this act? Is to develop a structured approach to sports development that will provide focus and direction to all stakeholders and bring coherence to the initiatives of the different stakeholders. Again, as you alluded to earlier, several consultations were held. As a matter of fact, we had 12 consultations island-wide, including Carriacou and Petit-Mardi. But further to that, after we were finished with that, we thought there were other stakeholders that we needed to consult with. And we consulted with about 90% of those stakeholders, which were mainly internal government organizations, the GOC, and other such bodies. We have completed all of those consultations. And as we said, we are in the process of writing the final recommendations. As part of the authority of the council would be a board of directors. And that will comprise of about 11 members. So because we have 7 parishes in the country, so we'll have the 7 parish directors plus other key stakeholders. And a critical part coming out of the consultation is the parish council. The parish council will be the engine where everything happened. And as you know now, community development is critical. We have to go back to the days of the villages. And you remember when on Williamson Road, you'll be playing football and cricket in the road? Right. We need to get back into those aspects to build the policy.
But people will say that with these crazy drivers, though.
I certainly believe you. And trust me, we'll have to find build up areas now to deal with those things.
Well,
I remember a conversation with Brian Pitt, who says their training was on Grenville Street, running that whole area.
Yeah, well, what we may have to do is strengthen Aaron Moses' point that make sure that ensuring that the playing fields are available for the folks.
Exactly so. Especially on a Sunday afternoon where you can have these activities, you know. So as part of the authority of the National Sports Council, you have the Ministry of Sport, you have the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Community Development, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, Board of Tourism, Grenada Olympic Committee, Civil Society, and we have added several others, including, although they will fall under possible Ministry of Health, but we have an heavily involvement of NADO, which is the anti-doping, and now we have the Grenada Sports Medicine Association as another critical stakeholder. And as part of all of these consultations, 2 things has come out: mental health and safety in sports, right? So those are added components now in the policy. And some of the objectives of the policy are as follows: to provide an enabling, non-discriminatory environment which will motivate citizens to become active participants in sport at all levels and across all groups. And I just want to add here that the National Development Plan 2035 has been integral in what we are doing, because the National Development Plan 2035 lays a framework for the entire development of the nation. And in there is sports, but sports falls under the sustainable development goal of health and wellness. So we do have included all of those in our things. A second objective of the policy is to maximize the social and economic benefits that Grenada can achieve from the participation in sport. Third, to strengthen the management and coordination of sporting activities in the country. We have several federations that are well organized, and we can name a few of them. However, there are other federations who, no fault of their own, are challenged in being at the same level. One could be that of financing, two, attracting sufficient volunteers. But the National Sports Council will have to help and support those that are weaker, so that at least we have excellence throughout federations. And mind you, we have 23 federations in the country, 17 which are affiliated to the GOC. So there is work to be done there. To develop and strengthen linkage between academics in sports and the national education system. One of the things that coming out of that is the student athlete. What are we doing for that student athlete? Five, to provide athletes from every sport and discipline who demonstrates the ability to become world-class performers with the opportunity to excel at that level. And we have had in the last 7 to 10 years several of our athletes emerging on the international scene. And we have a lot of our cricketers now also. And sometimes we do not remember our cricketers, even our women volleyballers, because volleyball now has gone into beach volleyball, and you have two-person teams. That has gone onto the international scene. So the national sports policy will seek to address all of that and support wherever we can. Most importantly, to preserve the integrity in which sport is carried out in Grenada and to promote fair play. So those are the main objectives of the policy. And coming out of that, there are several other things that we now have to do to support those objectives.
Um, yeah, so quite a bit there. Let me just, before I bring on Rudian, and Simmons is still having some issues with his video there, but we'll see if we can work around that in a while. May I just ask you, in naming some of those agencies, government ministries, which or what government agencies or departments are responsible for overseeing the implementation of the policy, and how will the progress be monitored?
The Ministry of Sport has overall responsibility for the overseeing and implementation of the national sports policy. They are the agent charged with that as an objective coming out of the National Development Plan. I think is 3.1325. The ministry has that responsibility.
All right. Okay. All right, Rudian, let me bring you on now.
Hey, pleasant good evening, sir. A lot that you just said, and it's really good to hear a lot of the great things that is about to happen. What is the timeline for this policy?
We looking to have the policy implemented no later, I would put in general terms, end of the year.
And is it a time for the policy? Is it 10-year policy? Is it a 5-year policy?
Initially, it's going to be a 5-year plan with the policy. So it's going to be rolling because we are a statutory, the policy drives the act. There's an act that legislates the policy, right? But the action plan for the policy is going to be a 5-year plan, right?
Okay.
So it's work in progress, and every year there's going to be a review. to add new dimensions, take out things that are absolute, and that kind of thing. So yes, it's a rolling plan.
Okay, that's pretty
How
good.
how have you been able to engage the sports community, including the athletes, the coaches, sports organizations, to really to gather input and feedback on the policies implementation, because we are at the stage now where we're going more or less into the implementation phase.
Well, as I said, we had about 10 to 12 consultations late in 2022. And through your own program, we have had consultations with the diaspora and some of the international athletes. Um, One of the weakness has been a full engagement of all of the international athletes. And when, as you rightly said in the start, the athlete is not just a track and field person. You have the basketballers, you have the cricketers, you have even rugby now, and you have, so it's engaging everyone. And speaking with officials at the Ministry of Sport yesterday, one of the new things they are looking at is it skip rope. So it has to deal with all of those, and then we have motorsport to deal with. So yes, we have been engaging and we have been having one-on-one conversations with major stakeholders and all of the stakeholders, and it's really walking the flow, creating relationships with all of these persons, because it's challenging to get people to come to a meeting to sit down and discuss things. And as Hazeland said, I think on your program recently or on another program, we really need one voice to have this discussion. We have several platforms where people are discussing the issues and you have different opinions here, there. But we really now need to have one voice, one final place where this entire thing is addressed.
One of the things that I'm also hearing is that um, a lot of folks who are on the head look at themselves when they were growing up, the things they used to do. The time we live in now is not the same. So how do the policy implement sports the way the time is today compared to when we were playing, and we could have played in the field, and we could have played in the road, and those things, and them those days is no longer there. And getting young athletes or young children to go back and play in the road like we used to do, that may not happen. So how do we transfer that from the road to the playing field?
I hear you, and there are 2 points here. Um, we have lost the village. We need to get back into the village. And as we always say, this African proverb, it takes the village to raise the child. We get educated and we move up the ladder and we leave the village and go into some other community to live. We need to recapture the village and then the community. We will then be able to. But as Michael said, I mean, when he played hopscotch on Maloney Street, there were less vehicles in the road.
Mhm.
We really need now to find avenues, right? But secondly, to your point, I was just looking at the New Zealand government, and they are discussing same issues that we have. How do we capture the 15-year-old to the 22-year or the 21-year-old? Because that gap is missing unless there is a parent or somebody with them. They are not there. In Grenada, at 15, 16, you enter the National Tamsisi College. That in itself has become a challenge. In some islands and some countries, we still do have Form 6, which is a secondary school, which keep keeps you there engaged for 2 years, right? However, we do have a challenge here. So we do have to continue the engagement with National College. We now have 17 last count persons at the National College who have done the physical education 2-year program, but they have done primarily an administrative program. So they can officiate at games, they can do other things, they can get into different aspects. But at the competitive level, they did not participate much. Granted that Anthony Beef Dixon and Cyril Cox recently started after COVID a new program at National College where they are now engaging different sporting activities, and the kids or children are returning to some of those activities. If the support is given to Mr. Dixon and Cyril and others at the National College, we can in fact see some improvements there. But the New Zealand government is looking at that issue. I am following it, and as within the Caribbean, we need to track what is happening at that age group. So yes, we can engage them some more.
All right. Let me see if I can add Mr. Simmons. It's just audio for now. To the program. Good afternoon, Edwin, Sam. Good afternoon, Roger Duncan. Yes, Mr. Clouden mentioned hopscotch. I don't have any video. Sorry about that. But it's not just hopscotch. Quite a bit. Mr. Simmons, good afternoon. Are you hearing us?
Yes, I'm hearing very clearly, but I'm so sorry that the video just not coming on. I don't know what the camera not coming on. I don't know what's happening.
Right, but you would have heard while you were
Yes.
trying to do a little technical thing in the back. You would have heard some of the discussions. If I may put to you and add into what all that Mr. Clouden would have added, I'm certain that an important point or concern or question that may be asked, and you may be in a position to provide some guidance in terms of an answer, is that what budgetary allocations or funding mechanisms you will say are in place to support the sports policy in terms of implementation phase or full implementation.
Okay, well, if I will not be in a position to give figures, but what I can say is that the experience that we had last year, or the end of this fiscal year, the experience that we had is somewhat similar to what I had in 2008, because the minister came in and he was not too aware of what was happening. And I have to keep telling him now that we have to forget what passed, because I had a similar experience, and we now have to set things in motion to make sure that we capture what we need to capture so that we can have the full implementation of the policy for sports and physical activity. So that is what we are doing now. And I must say that we have gone a real far way, because we started before the bunch. We were ahead of the other groups. And I can say so because I had the opportunity to be part of a team that received the first training in terms of being prepared for the preparation for budget. And the ministry itself had a session after, but myself and the minister already had our session, so we had some information and know exactly how we were going to proceed. But even to that, myself and Clouden, we had discussions with that long before that period. And that is where the experiences now came in. So we started the process of preparing for that budget for the sports policy. What we also discovered is that because of the amount of information we collected, especially with the especially from the national federations and organizations, what we are going to include would also impact not only on the implementation of the policy, but it would also impact on the entire ministry when it comes to sports, because we had some serious consultation and engagement with the national federations, and we really emphasize the importance of having their itinerary, their programs for the upcoming period be presented not only to us but also to the GOC. And I must add in here, I am the level of cooperation right now that we're getting from the GOC is unbelievable. And that is something that we need to highlight, because we cannot go forward without the GOC, because the GOC is the organization that is more or less has jurisdiction over all these federations that stems from the Olympic itself. So that is a plus. But I can say not only in terms of the budgetary allocation, which we have it ready to go, but also the rewards and incentive packages for our elite athletes. That again too, we have already prepared. We have some discussion with the GOC, because we're in partnership with them. So we have to share it with them so that they can have their input. But the secretariat really did an excellent work in terms of preparation. Well, not the secretariat, but Alvin did an excellent work in terms of preparing that document. So we have that already prepared too. So we are far advanced in terms of making that presentation for budgetary allocation for the implementation of the policy, and also for the sports department. But if you just give me the opportunity just to divert a little and to stress now the importance of physical activity, because this hopscotch and this ski rope has more to do with physical activity than it has to do with organized sports. This hopscotch and this ski rope, in my opinion, must be driven by the community. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to get it to be driven by the community, then parents must be involved. So at the end of the day, it's not only focusing on sports, but we must have the physical activity aspect of it integrally involved at the community level.
Right. Here is a question for you folks. It's on the monitor. What strategies have been employed to promote inclusivity and accessibility in sports under the national sports policy, particularly for underrepresented groups, I should say?
Well,
any of you?
If I were to lead on it, I would like a definition for underrepresented groups, because remember, the focus is on the national associations and the national association federations. They all have their affiliates at the community level, and the invitation that went out deals specifically with clubs, schools, groups, and all people of the community. So that person will have to give a definition to say exactly what, when they say on the terminology used, they will definitely have to define who are these people, so that if we have not captivated them, we can return to do so.
Okay, but in because you are dealing with it, can we just say, okay, unrepresented could be probably some of the sporting disciplines that are not quote unquote high profile? I'm just trying to, for argument's sake, I'm just trying to use something.
Well, I don't know if Alvin could add to what I said, because I think the engagement is across the board. I got some information this morning that the minister would be meeting with the Domino Association, National Domino Association. And, well, they are meeting with the ministry. So that in itself, too, is an indication that
Right.
I would see this grouping probably as an underrepresented group that we are engaging. So it, it's it's kind of it's kind of difficult to figure out which grouping is this one
Okay.
from where I see.
All right. Well, the questions are coming in. Here's another one. It has to do with, can you share any success stories or significant achievement that have resulted from the policies implementation thus far?
Let me take that one right off the bat. It's it's possibly the first time we have had a meeting of all federations in June this year or early July to come together to try and put a calendar of activities for 2024. We did have a 2023 June to December plus a 2024 calendar of activities. Now, so we met and we discussed things like budgets and how to prepare budgets. We had representatives from the Ministry of Finance presence, um, showing and indicating the impact of budget preparation and what it means for sports to show what it is doing and its impact on the national economy. So one of the first, I would say, impact so far is the coming together of the federations to kind of put together this calendar. We hope to complete this calendar by the end of this month. As usual, out of the 23 federations, we have submissions from about 20 of 14. We are waiting the rest. However, if in another week we do not have information from the others, we will go ahead to produce a draft calendar of events for 2024. Granted that 2024 is also the Olympic year, so there is not much federations having things on the international arena, but we are putting that calendar together. The second, I would say, is the relationship, as Mr. Simmons has said, that we are building with both the GOC and federations themselves. We are constantly in contact and dialogue with federations, and they are coming forward and asking questions, seeking assistance. Third, we have just assisted the revival of the, not the revival, but the assistance to the Grenada NADO or anti-doping in terms of regularizing some outstanding issues they had. But right now, the Grenada Sports Medicine Association is right back on stream. We have had meetings together with the registrar of trade names and things because the federation, the association which was formed sometime in 2002 by the late Dr. David Lambert and Dr. Sonia Johnson and others, after lack of interest, went dormant, and for about 12 years they were dormant through Dr. Sonia Phillip, Dr. Sonia Johnson, and Natalie Regis and other members. We now have uh, got them re-registered under the on the international body FIMS, Federation for Sports Medicine Association. And as we speak, Miss Natalie Regis is in Brazil attending the Congress. She has she is meeting with several of the leaders there. So those are initial, I would say, success. So that now there was a meeting of coaches and others last week or 2 weeks ago on the whole issue of sports medicine in Grenada. So coming out of that, all coaches, officials are invited to be part of that, to begin to use the sports science as part of their training and development to increase and improve how we deliver sports to our athletes. So those are just 3 or 4 quick examples of what this policy and the secretariat has been able to achieve during this period.
Mhm. Let me see. What challenges or obstacles have you encountered in implementing the national sports policy, and how are you addressing them? And there's another one that goes with it. When I say goes with it, that it has to do with how are you promoting grassroots sports development and talent identification as part of the policy's implementation? Well, either one.
So let me take the second one first, if Mr. Simmons will allow. Um, we have not started work on promoting the grassroots because remember, it's part of the policy implementation. So once we have sorted and gotten budgetary approvals, we will be in a position to implement, but there are approaches and strategies to address. And I believe one of the fundamental strategies is getting into the village, getting into the community. A lot is being targeted at the schools, both primary and secondary schools, be it culture, be it the arts, be it sport. There is so much that the schools can absorb and deal with together with the academic focus. And therefore, yes, the grassroots, but we have to deal with it at both the village and community level. Yes, the schools are part of the village and community, but we believe engagement there is critical. Coming to your point about Mr. Moses, we got to have things back on a Sunday evening in all of the communities, some activity, be it Saturday and Sunday, and even sometimes during the week. But yes, but let's go back to the previous question or the challenges. Um, Personally, the challenges operating initially in a private sector environment and trying to deal with the policy at through government agency, that in itself is a challenge in terms of the pace at which things happen. And we are addressing that by building relationships with all our stakeholders. We just have to continue to build relationships so that we can able to deal. And as Pope Francis says, it's only through dialogue that we bring solutions to issues.
Mhm. Right. Let me see there.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, yes, please.
Do,
Go ahead.
do the Ministry of Education is a part of the sports policy in terms of a partnership?
The sports policy is under the Ministry of Education, Sports, Culture, and Youth. So it's one ministry, except that we have a minister with responsibility for youth, sports, and culture, and a minister for education. But yes, there is that collaboration and there is engagement to take place because, for example, the issue of student athlete must be dealt with both education and sport, and the issue of competitions in school. Um, it's all part of the curriculum. So yes, it's all a one, well, two separate buildings, but one ministry, and that engagement will continue.
So the grassroots that's been talked about, and it talks about quite a lot over the years. We've been hearing about the grassroots. Can they be implemented through schools instead of the community as we talk about?
Um, I was at football before coming here, and there is a concept of what is grassroots. And in some instance, grassroots means if you have never played the sport before or have never had involvement. But sometimes we use grassroots as youth development. So we need to be mindful and careful when we keep using the word grassroots. What specifically are we referring to? Is it youth development in sport or grassroots where you never had an opportunity to play the sport before? And as our policy would speak to, there are about three elements. So you have the elite sports, you have sports for all, and sports development. And there are three separate components that needs to be addressed because you have, as the civil society in their discussion in the last budget spoke to the issue of sports for all. We are now talking about the elite sport and how do we support our elite athletes. But we now have to speak of sports development for our talented persons. So when Sylvan returns to Grenada, he will lead that mantle to ensure that the development for our talent is in good in good hands.
There two questions here that one has to do with, and probably Mr. Simmons might be able to chime in on that one too. It says on the lead up to the implementation of the national sports policy, what are the strategies to ensure TAMCC, the TA Marshall Community College, will be part of the secondary school games? That's one. And I guess as much it's all had to do with some of the comments that would have been made by Mr. Moses on last week's program, as well as the sports for all that is enshrined in the national sports policy. And then there's also one has to do with the what are the strategies and timelines to ensure adequate amount of certified coaches and physical education personnel are available for the implementation of the national sports policy across Carriacou and PD Martinique.
I'm not in a position to say yea or nay to TAMCC and being part of the secondary school games. Because in my view, TAMCC is actually a tertiary institution. And if it is a tertiary institution, then their business of sporting engagement must be at the tertiary level. Whatever mechanism could be set up to make that happen, as far as I'm aware, there is no official, meaningful discussion on that. So, for example, I cannot say to you that the ministry or the Department of Sports, along with the TAMCC board, which is under education also, has met and had some meaningful discussion on the way forward for engagement with sports as it relates to TAMCC. So that is something that needs to happen, and I think it should be driven by the Secretariat. The Secretariat should take the responsibility to drive that process. Added to that, I think there are models that were introduced before, because I can recall where you had tertiary games being held in Grenada before with the TAMCC. I think you had MULO, and there were even involvement from St. George's University.
University, yes.
Yeah, and there was a guy from St. Vincent at the time. He could recall he was a very good long jumper and triple jumper, but he was at St. George's University, and he participated, and I was very much impressed with his level of performance and everything. So the point I'm making here is that there is a framework already. There is something that was tried already, and probably it's just a matter of having a discussion and trying to see how you can strengthen what has already been tried and developed, instead of having to. But that is something that calls for discussion. So one cannot say definitely that what strategy we're going to use to make it happen, and it definitely has to come from the top.
All right. There's you mentioned a while ago it has to do with the whole issue of anti-doping. So there is one here that has to do with not just anti-doping, but also what it says, match fixing. It says what steps are being taken to promote sports integrity, including measures against doping and match fixing. Are you addressing issues relating to doping, match fixing, and other forms of unethical behavior in sports as part of the policy's implementation?
And I will say yes. And as I indicated, we are collaborating with the agency with that responsibility, which is the NADO, and they are fully supported by the National Sports Council and the Ministry of Sport. They have that mandate and they will address those things there. So, and one of the things that we learned in a policy review with the Ministry of Health, and we have taken the approach to be horizontal in the development of the policy, which means the policy must not seek to address every issue that comes to it separately. If it's a health related policy or issue, through the Ministry of Health policy, the policy, sports policy, would allow the Ministry of Health through its policy to address the issue. For example, mental health. We cannot set up a body within the Sports Council specifically deal with mental health, but the Ministry of Health has a unit and has the capacity, has the specialists. So we will influence in the policy for health that it takes care of mental health in sport, and the policy persons were very welcoming to the idea that they need to address that. Similarly, with the anti-doping and unethical things, we have had discussions with AML and to deal with anti-money laundering, and we have had they actually made a presentation in one of our discussions. So we are addressing those issues through the relevant agency.
Okay.
If,
Brilliant.
if
Oh
I
no,
can add,
sorry.
yeah, if I can add something to that, what I think what we need to to do is to get the general public to appreciate that the policy in itself, the policy document, is a live document, a document that would have to be addressed, and things will change as we move along because things are very dynamic now when it comes to sports. Safety in sports is one example. This thing is so dynamic, and that document, as things evolve, that document will have to address certain issues. So sometimes it is difficult to answer the question about the implementation. Now, the issue is there. The document may have its saying on that particular issue, but not until something happens, then you will be able to use the document or the policy to address that particular issue. So the document is a live document, and we may not be in a position to say, okay, the implementation of this is ongoing, not until something happens in that particular area where the document now will become alive and we'll be able to refer to it to say, okay, this is how we treated it because it's part of the document.
All right. Let me see. There's another one because you mentioned a bit about the whole issue of the engagement with the public, even though I think the foremost will be the sportsmen and sportswomen and the administrators, whether the associations. I think they are the immediate constituents regarding the sports policy. The public has the public has to some extent involvement, but I think you want the people who are directly benefiting from the sports policy to have some sort of knowledge. But how are you communicating? The question would be, how are you communicating the progress and outcomes of the policy's implementation to the public and the stakeholders, meaning the sports associations rather, the athletes, all those who are involved? How are you communicating the progress of the outcomes?
We have not done a good job in communicating the outcomes as we progress. And both coming from a communication background, I believe there should have been a lot more. There was a specific plan to engage our stakeholders on progress on a quarterly basis. We have done two such publications or thing, but a lot more could have been done. And going forward, now that we are in a better position, you will see much more done. By the end of next week, we should have clearance on our logo. Our logo has been designed. It will get final approval in this coming week. We have met with the registrar at Kaipo. We are going to do it's going to be called a publication called Athlete, Grenadian Athlete. That'll be the name of it, Grenadian Athlete. Um, but it's going to be an online thing because you know my peeve about printed stuff now. But so it's going to be the Grenadian Athlete. So we just getting the trademark registration for that. That is going to be thing. Our website should be up at the end of this week. We are testing the website right now. That will be done together with all of the social media handles. All of that work is currently ongoing and being tested. So once the policy is finished, we would have not necessarily a big launch, but we'll be in a better position to share more through those things. But um, we are in a place where a lot of the background work is done. So once we say push button, everything could literally go.
Right. And I want to ask another question before Rudian comes in with his own. How do you plan to adapt and evolve the national sports policy in response to technological trends? You know, things that are happening, whether it's technological, societal trends, whatever it is. How do you hope to adapt and evolve that sports policy?
We know had a discussion with Mr. Book. I just his name just first name just slipped me, but Michael, you would know him. He used to be at Flow.
Okay, yeah. It's
Edmund Book,
Edmund Book,
and he is now at the ICT as the ICT director.
okay.
Right? And he has had some work already being done for Carifta, I understand, in terms of involving technology in Carifta. So yes, for example, a lot of our requests and a lot of our things will be online. We are looking at a different set of apps. For example, I know you have had discussions with a number of persons on media going forward and broadcasting. But we looking at the sports policy at the Sports Council will have almost a similar thing like what Pan Am Sports has, a sports channel that can host and have all of its um, parish and local events there. The whole issue of athlete registration. Every athlete who is a registered person in a federation should be registered on our system and we can build the profile. We need to be able, when Coach Sylvan says, I want 5 basketball players or whatever, we don't be scrambling to get that data and that profile.
Yeah, data
Um,
collection. Yeah.
Mr. Lincoln Toro Deputy, who raised the issue several months ago, has not been responding to our call to discuss and collaborate. We spoke, but I can say this week we were able to get access to storage, a hard drive with several terabytes of space to begin to archive videos and all those things. But we are going to be using athlete registration. One of the challenges I noticed well, not a challenge, one of the solutions that Barbados has just implemented, any person going on an athlete scholarship or whatever must be registered with the sports body or the Ministry of Sport. Must be registered. Otherwise, you will not have get whatever thing. So one of the things that we'll have to do is to ensure that all athletes, whoever going on scholarships, whatever, or involved in anything sports related, is also registered on that database. We need to be able to use technology to make it easier to work.
Yeah, well, good to hear that. And one of the supporting elements of the sports policy has to do with the parish sports councils. Okay, we know that St. John's, for example, has an existing sports council. When last we spoke, we made mention of it and other things. Where are we now in terms of the establishment of the parish sports councils in particular?
Right. And as you mentioned, St. John's, General Secretary Vida Bruno of the GOC recently reminded me that the desk that I see in La Sagesse was provided for the National Sports Council in the Parish Sports Council in St. David some years ago, and that desk is still there. Yes, we have just completed renovations in La Sagesse, Progress Park in St. Andrew, the Lauriston Mini Stadium in Carriacou. So we have completed those three. We are soon to start work in Cuthbert Peters Park. We just have an internal challenge where a government office is located in the office that is earmarked for that. They should move out of that shortly, and once that the renovations will be completed there. St. Mark will commence in another 2 weeks, and then we already have the St. George office, which is stationed at the National Stadium. Room 138 is already assigned. So we basically have the other one that we have to do is St. Patrick. We have identified Font Recreational Center, the community center there. There used to be an IT room there, so we are beginning to do the renovations work there. One of the things that we have to do is to make sure that the Ministry of Infrastructure is all part and parcel of that. So the scope of works and the approvals, once finished, meets all of the requirements. But let me just add something on that in terms of going forward with regards to infrastructure development. One of the things that the policy would seek to do is to ensure that any new infrastructure for sport has elements or components for the physically challenged and persons, and also for female. Women in sports is going to be a big thing for the National Sports Council. We need to work on that. But for example, I keep making the point that a lot of our sporting facilities are built with male toilet facilities. We do not have sufficient infrastructure for women, and they are particular needs of women, both hygiene and security and safety. So going forward, those are things that the policy will ensure that is taken care of. So we are 50% completed with the refurbishing of our offices. We hope to have the elections to the parish councils in November, so that all parish councils will be appointed or inaugurated, or whatever the correct word is, come January 2024, once budget is passed and approved. Because subventions for these will be part of the budget requests for 2024, and each parish will have a subvention to run its affairs. Each parish will be responsible for at least one facility to begin with as we roll out the plan.
Mr. Simmons, you have been quiet for a while, but at the policy level, how are things going regarding what sort of feedback can you give us in terms of whether it's the ministers, prime minister, are they on the same page as we are regarding the national sports policy and its imminent implementation?
Before I answer that question, I just want to add to what Alvin said a while ago. We also looking at making some adjustments with this current climate situations that we are experiencing. We believe that going forward, there must be some level of adjustment in terms of the way facilities are being constructed to facilitate climate change, and not only facilities, but also physical education within the school system. Know at what time these activities are actually being conducted, because we know in recent times, recent weeks, recent months, we have been experiencing serious temperature change, increasing temperature, what they refer to as heat waves. And that in itself, if that continue, and we definitely would have to make some adjustments to accommodate that climate change issue. So hence, I know that Alvin has some meetings scheduled with the Ministry of Climate Change and Resilience. So things of that nature would be discussed. Now, I can safely say that the Secretariat and the Minister for Sports is on the same page. I cannot say that in regard to the Prime Minister, because not until information is transferred from the Secretariat or from the department onto the minister, then onto the cabinet and the Prime Minister. So there are certain information that the minister would be aware of, but it's still in its developmental stage. Not until we reach to the point. I'll give you a good example. A good example is the criteria for that document for the elite athletes with rewards and incentives. It's still in its developmental stage in terms of having that overall view. Now the minister is aware of it, but the cabinet is not aware of it yet. So not until when we have that final document, we say, okay, minister, this is it. It's your task now to take it to your cabinet colleagues through the PS. And then, well, if he chooses to make any alteration before he goes up to his colleagues, well, it's up to him. But that's the document that we will present to him. So there are certain issues or certain documents and certain policy information that he will be aware of, appraised of, and that his cabinet colleagues would not be aware of it as yet. But at the end of the day, for anything to happen, it must pass through the cabinet room. So they will be aware.
Okay, because I know the whole issue of incentives has been a talking point, especially among individuals and associations. But we know that, and I mean, from previous discussions, it's a hot topic, but it's not something that is realistic in its form. In that, how do you determine and put on paper and put in a policy document the sort of incentive you will give someone who wins, let's say, a gold medal at a World Championships or Olympic Games compared to Carifta Games? I see it as something that will be an ongoing discussion with federation to federation, or federations and federations, and it has to be dependent on certain factors, including the economy, so many things that can be taken into consideration. But sticking on the whole issue of the incentive, what can you tell us regarding that?
Well, I'll choose not to. Okay, let's put it that way. The incentives for our elite athletes, in most of the cases, will be monetary incentives. The rewards and so forth will be monetary, and it will focus not only on their achievements as individual individuals within the particular sporting discipline, but their coaches. The recommendation is to that the coaches would be beneficiaries to whatsoever they get. So we need to put the coaches within the mix. Now there are other incentives for student athletes.
Right.
So probably we're talking about athletes now that performing at the character level and probably at our national level. There are incentives also highlighted for them. So in that case, most of it will be tangible, or let's think like scholarships and so forth that we can make available to them. But it's a whole list, So just to give an example.
Michael, at the risk, let me share something or ask a question on the other hand. Rudian returns to the track and he wins gold in the Olympics in 2024. Rudian, what would you be looking for?
Are you asking me the question?
Yes, I am.
And it's I understand in the context. Yeah.
Yeah. Diplomatic passport.
Excellent.
Right. So that is part of the mix too.
Right. So yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's a hot topic, and that there's so many variables, right? That Rudian might say he's looking for a passport. Another one may say they're looking for a house and land. Another one may even say I'm looking for a scholarship because I may want to go on to do a postgrad. So many variables. So it's not something, and that's why my argument is it something that you can put in a policy document, or something that you will have to discuss based on the situation?
But let me jump in here again. The very first policy in 2010 had a framework, but never put financial.
Right. And there was a reason for that.
Correct.
And there was a reason for that, right?
Yeah. And to Rudian's initial questions today as to the lifespan of the policy, every time the policy is updated, that could change. Yeah. Because it can change every cycle. Yeah. And we are recommending that the cycle is with the Olympic cycle.
That's
right?
A 4-year cycle, right?
So it's a 4-year cycle. So persons going into 2024 Olympic will know whatever the decisions are on incentives. So you have something to go with. But remember, as part of that, you also have incentive for the elite athlete who is also preparing for the Olympic. Because not just winning a medal or placing in the final 8 or semi-final, but there is also an incentive to train. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if I want to become an elite athlete, I need training, but I also need support in possible helping me find an agent, helping me find sponsorship. Because you will not know that we have a number of elite athletes without sponsors. Mm-hmm. Is it because they do not want it, or they were unable to find an agent to help them? Mm-hmm. The national sports policy should be in a position to provide that kind of agency guidelines and help. So we can call on a consultant and say, this is the pathway for this athlete. How can you help? So we can support the athlete going forward, right? On the issue of funding for those things, we also have to look at how we fund those things. It must not always be funded by the government coffers. We have to find other ways. And there are several proposals that have come forward, even including one which was floated, a 501k, which is, help me guys that live in the US, a foundation, it's like the Sanders Foundation, so that persons in the diaspora can contribute and get tax incentives on tax write-offs, whatever.
Yeah.
But those are also funding things that we can do. I just saw a comment.
Yeah, I know.
No, Roger, baby, seven, man.
But
I know.
here's the question, and I was going to ask the question previously, and you answered the question, Alvin. In terms of registering, in terms of having the athletes in Grenada register, is it a paid? Do they have to pay to register, or is it free?
Let me answer it this way. We want to start registering at primary school. So every athlete who participates in a primary school event should be registered. So no, it's not going to be a paid for
Paid.
something.
Do
It's
that registration covered insurance?
insurance is a separate topic,
Yeah.
and we have
And
discussions.
because I'm getting to a point, right?
Yeah.
And I because I'm here in Toronto, and I'm track and field, when the athletes register and coaches, they are covered. That's why I asked that question. Are they covered? Because like I said, like you explained how with Barbados, athletes must register in terms of scholarship or incentive. I don't have to register with the policy because I don't need to benefit from the policy, but I can still get a scholarship, and I can still take part in sports.
Well, isn't the registration it has to do with more of your not so much it's more or less like having your database
Yeah.
and ensuring that in the event that, for example, as you indicated, Alvin, that a coach, let's say in Australia, is looking for a cricketer, for example, or a team in Australia is looking for a cricketer, that you can have something that you can go by in terms of a database and pull up the information about this said cricketer, for example, a young cricketer, 19-year-old, and an opportunity for them to go and play cricket, let's say in Australia or England. You can use the database, but not so much registering for, let's say, having to be in an insurance or something like that.
Yeah.
Give some explanation into that.
Right. No, I hear you, and that is it. But I also like Rudian's drift in that you can also benefit if you are registered. And I think
Yeah.
we have to look at that. So it's probably we need to have a discussion after this call, sometime during next week, as to how we can and develop that, because I've had unofficial conversation on the issue of an NIS credit. Basically, how an athlete gets sick and is unemployed. Who takes care of him outside of insurance? Right? So there are several issues, and coming out of today, we can have further engagement as to what you have experienced, what you can share, and how you can guide us going forward on that. Because we do have friends, Michael will know, from Gov, good strikers, played for Grenada, medically are challenged, and have to seek public support.
Yeah.
Right? We need to move out. So those are things that we have to do in the new development of the policy, right? So that those things are taken care of as we move and develop and we change in time.
We have just under 10 minutes remaining in the program. We had a little 30-minute bonus today, but there is something I need to ask regarding, because I didn't think I heard much about it, but it has to do with measures. Have measures been taken to encourage public and private sector partnership to support the implementation of the sports policy?
Yes, we have had again just initial discussion with members of individual members of the chamber. And as a matter of fact, one former president um, provided us with several paragraphs of recommendations on incentives, funding, tax write-offs, whatever you may say. Because one of the things we were looking at is a sponsor, somebody contributes to a federation, to a sport, what tax credit they can get, right? And we just received legislation out of Trinidad and Tobago where there is some act and a policy. So it's something that we are looking at as to how this, but we discovered that there's already something here in Grenada. It's just that it hasn't been used widely, and not much people are aware of it. But discussions with the Ministry of Finance and others, we were able to strengthen and put the right terminology and things there, so that can be, for example, going forward, things like concessions on items coming into the country for sport. We have a list, but I always give this example. While at GFA, we brought in sports bra for our women and was like, what is this? Customs like, you got to pay on this. It's not on the list, right? So we have to start updating and doing those things so that those things becomes norm. So yes, continue discussion with members in the Chamber of Commerce and business places, because in one of the last discussions we had where a CEO of a company was present, who is a major supporter and sponsor of one of our elite athletes, said her 2023-24 budget is already approved. And this was July 2023. You therefore now cannot come in September, October, November asking for sponsorship when she's already prepared her budget for 2023, 2024. We got to move in those, understand those timelines in such a way that we almost have an 18-month rolling budget preparation. We have to get to an 18-month budget preparation so that 18 months out, we know, so we can catch both the person who has a financial timeline of March, June, and December, so that we can get the support of of business community.
All right. You see on the monitor there, if you just help me a bit, it has to do with broadcast. Well, it has to do with broadcast. Let's say that using broadcast rights to sell or market our sportsmen and sportswomen. And I must say, we have to look at, for example, what Richie Oliver is doing and what Mikey Hutchison is also doing in terms of assisting in promoting our sports. If one thing we can say is that within the last 2 or 3 years, we have had more sporting events highlighted or stream or broadcast, to the world than ever before. But in going forward, in an organized fashion, probably through the sports policy, how we can ensure that our local sports and particularly and assisting our sportsmen and sportswomen through broadcast rights.
Right. So the policy will speak to that issue of broadcast rights. I'm aware that there is a body being developed. Remember, Michael, I guess you remember in about 2002, there was a formation of a Grenada Sports Media Association,
Yeah.
which dealt with those issues then. The policy will seek to address broadcast rights because it has come up, as you said, even at Intercall and other things. And the whole issue of intellectual property rights, those are things that must be addressed. So yes, a policy on the broadcast rights, and the whole training for broadcasters, commentators, and announcers is critical. You cannot have. We have a Grenada Athletic Announcers Association or group, and they are doing a fantastic job in training and improving. But we have other sport that that are challenged with those things, right? So we need to train persons and have some agency that can train them, so that across the board we have a higher level of broadcast, because we are reaching more persons now than before.
All right. So as we get ready to wrap up, Simmons, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there. You know, whether you can share any plans for future developments or adjustments to the policy based on lessons that you may have learned during initial implementation phases. Anything you may want to share?
Yes, that the issue of past athletes who are not in a position to take care of the daily needs.
Yeah, the welfare of the athletes, right? The
Welfare,
athletes' welfare.
yes. I think that is something that we definitely will have to put some emphasis on, because too many occasions we have noticed, athletes that give up their best for service of country through sports, and at the end of the day, for whatever reason, they find themselves in positions where they really cannot take care of their own personal well-being at the twilight of the life. So that is something we definitely will have to put some emphasis on, and to see how we can make a difference in the lives of these people as we continue to offer change through sports for the entire nation. So that is an area I can make a promise that we're going to try to champion going forward.
All right. So Clouden?
So I think Rudian did ask, or you may have asked, next steps. So we want to have a final draft of the updated policy for internal review by the 22nd of September. Have a final review by the 30th of September with stakeholders. Simultaneously prepare and complete our business plan and strategic action plan for 2024 to 2027. It should be 2027 by the end of October. Complete the refurbishing of our parish councils by the 13th of October, and prepare submissions for cabinet simultaneously around the same 13th of October. Legislation in place for the policy based on cabinet's approval in November or in time. We don't want to get caught with the budget. Budget may be late November, early December, or it might be good if we get the act passed on the same day as it was in 2012, January. But I know Mr. Simmons do not want us to go into 2024 without an act. Elections of the parish councils in November.
An updated act.
An updated act.
Yeah, updated. Yeah.
An amended act, yeah.
Amended, yeah.
And appointment of board of directors in November. The minister has already given instructions to start that process. So by the end of November, we should have recommendations for the appointment of persons to the board of directors for the National Sports Council.
Right. Okay. Rudian?
Yes, gentlemen, most definitely. I'm very proud in this moment to be a former athlete of Grenada, seeing that sports is moving forward, and there is benefit for athletes, which in the past was never there. And I really do enjoy what I've heard. Mr. Simmons, you said it well in the last statement in terms of initiative for from our athletes. But it's not only in initiative only, but also identifying, acknowledging those athletes, from our athletes who have represent Grenada. And they walk around in their parishes, in the community, and the young ones don't know that. So if there's a way that there you could identify those who have been, a national athlete, it can help build the community, because they will look it up to this athlete and say, this person represents Grenada. I can do the same. And they could be an ambassador just in the same way in the community. So I think something like that, yes, it's always good to help some of the financially, or medically if we can, but identifying too is also a great tool as well. But thank you again, for having me listen on, Michael. It's always a pleasure being on with you. And I'm really looking forward to see a better Grenada for sports.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Rudian. Thank you, one and all. Just a reminder that for the Athletes Commission, you have a forum on the rights and responsibility of athletes, the athletes' mental well-being, and the adoption of the athletes' declaration. That's next Saturday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Right, professional and collegiate athletes in particular. I think that is the focus, and you more or less welcome to participate. And don't forget as well, we have international cricket coming to Grenada, England versus West Indies in December, 2 T20 internationals on the 14th of December, and then 2 days later on the 16th, T20 internationals. So once again, it's an opportunity for you to participate. And I guess as much for those who may want to travel to Grenada, there's sporting activities just before the Christmas, as you will say. So if you want to take that as part of your plans, okay, please feel free to do that as well. Folks, that is all I can tell you for this weekend. It has been a very interesting discussion. Obviously, the opportunity is always there for the officials to come back and to talk again. And certainly there's always a lot of questions to be asked and to be answered regarding the national policy on sports and physical education. It's my pleasure, and it has been a pleasure being with you. Hope to see you next week, God's willing, for another program. Until then, do have yourself a pleasant weekend.